Hey everybody, happy Friday, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today for the second episode of Introducing Particle, a new series that we have created with the goal of just introducing our community and folks that are interested in IoT development to the people at Particle that are building the real IoT, whether it's employees, customers, partners, what have you. We had our first episode a couple of weeks ago, and I am super excited for the second episode to actually bring in Particle co-founder and CTO Zachary Crockett, who we refer to as Doc. And we're going to talk about IoT security today. So let's just switch right over to the conversation and not spend any more time in the intro. So good morning, Doc. How are you? Hey, Doc, can you hear me? Good morning.
Just unmuted myself.
All right, no
I'm not hearing you. Technical difficulties.
You're not hearing me? All right, let me make sure that my... Sorry about that, Doc. Okay, hey, Doc, can you hear me now? Totally
Yes,
my fault. Totally my fault. All technical difficulty. All right, so I did the intro already, and we're rolling. We're ready to go. So good morning, Doc. How are you?
Good morning. I am doing great. Happy Friday, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy Friday to you. So I mentioned just a few minutes ago that we're starting with the topic of IoT security today, which I know is one that is near and dear to you as Particle's CTO and co-founder. So you've been with Particle from the beginning. Before we dig into the IoT security topic in earnest, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got into this world of technology and IoT to begin with.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. My background. Well, I grew up in Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas. Went to college in Nashville at Vanderbilt. Moved with my then girlfriend, now wife, to San Francisco to just follow the Beat Poets and go live in San Francisco because I'd heard cool things about San Francisco for a few years. Went to Baltimore to get a master's degree at Johns Hopkins. Went to the University of Minnesota for a PhD. All those degrees are in music. I have a music composition PhD. But all throughout that process, I was programming computers, and I had always done both computers and music side by side, and was always sort of paying the bills and learning how to write software better and better, and how to run a software business. And through that, I ended up in Minneapolis, end of the PhD, and met Zach I was working in a co-working space there called Coco. Now it's called Fueled Collective, part of Mohit from last time, and several other Particle folks still work there out of. Actually, no, they've moved to another one. They recently changed their co-working space.
That's right. Yeah.
But I was working there serving other startups in the Twin Cities, and that is when Zach moved to town. Co-founder Zach, and he had this crazy idea that he wanted to work on. We met, hi, I'm Zach. Oh, so am I. Nice to meet you. And whiteboarded some stuff out and figured out that we worked really well together, and off we went.
Yeah. So how did that? So being in the same co-working space, I love those serendipitous stories and those meetings that now years later you look back on and you think, wow, we could have been in two different places on two different days and things would have turned out differently. But obviously, something you all have gelled from the beginning. You continue to work well together. So how quickly after you both met did things transition into, hey, we have the same name, let's get to know each other, into hey, I've got this idea, you've got this passion, let's actually build this thing?
Yeah. It was pretty much immediate, because when Zach moved to Minneapolis, his goal there was he was specifically embarking on this. I'm focusing on my startup journey, and it was just him at that point, and he was basically I always tell people he's more technical than most CEOs, and I am more business savvy than most CTOs. And we share a lot of values, and we communicate well, and we end up just really making a really great pair. And he was at a point where he had a basic prototype, and he needed a more technical co-founder to start making the thing production grade. And so it was pretty much immediate. He was on the hunt, shall we say, for a technical co-founder when he came to Minneapolis.
Very cool. So, and what about the idea really drew you in terms of, I know, and maybe not everybody knows, because it may be worth sort of talking about the early history of Particle from connected lighting into where we are today as a full-on IoT platform. But what about the idea and the concept really drew you in your early conversations?
Yeah, so I am a very intuitive person. So is Zach. And I would say a lot of it was just chemistry. We just hit it off. We share a lot of the same values. And so the reason that he was the sort of impetus for the Spark socket was that Zach's dad was deaf. And as the deaf community moved onto mobile phones, a lot of the infrastructure that they had been using stopped working. If a deaf person gets a phone call on the hard line, they have lights flash and they have a system to interact there. If they get a text message and the phone's not in their pocket, like they don't know. And so Zach was like, I can use Twilio, I can use an Arduino, I can make the lights flash when my dad gets a text message. That was the initial idea that made him want to build the Spark socket. And from there, we turned it into a thing that became something that everybody could use and could provide a lot of value, not just in the deaf community, but also far beyond. And so off we went on my birthday in 2012. We launched the Spark Socket campaign, and I had a broken leg at the time because I took a corner too fast on my fixie heading into work in Minneapolis one time, and looked down and my foot was facing the wrong way.
Ouch!
So.
That's part of the story I haven't heard before.
I'll show you some pictures, some X-rays sometime.
Yeah.
There are pictures of us sitting in cocoa, and my foot's up on the up on a thing.
Oh, that's great. So one of my favorite parts of the Particle story is what the company became out of, as you and Zach like to say, that failed Kickstarter campaign. Pivoting from a very specific application of connected technology into building something more generic designed to enable other people to embrace IoT, to embrace connectivity. What was that like? Because having done a few Kickstarter campaigns myself, there's a huge emotional swing with those things. And what was that experience like for you guys when you ended that first campaign and you sort of went back to the drawing board and said, okay, this didn't work, but we still believe there's something here?
Yeah. As you say, huge emotional swings. And by the way, on your Kickstarter campaigns, my daughter Persephone loves Ed Gets Power Back and Ellie Saves the Day.
Oh, thanks.
she's telling all her 3-year-old friends about printed circuit boards and controllers. So.
That's great. That makes me happy.
It's like, chip is made of semiconductor. It was like, you may be the youngest person ever to use that word.
I love that. That's great.
So yeah, Kickstarter campaigns are a thing that consume your whole life when you run one. If anybody out there hasn't run one before, and the Spark Socket was our first. And we were Zach and me and one other person named Stephanie were like all in on this. And it consumed everything day and night, constantly watching all the stats and like trying to project what we could do and figuring out what are the stretch goals and how can we keep the buzz going. And it is a more than full-time job to run one. And as we got toward the end of it, so for anybody who doesn't know, it's a connected lighting socket, retrofit socket. It would screw into a light socket, and then you could screw a light bulb into it, and it was connected to Wi-Fi, and you could then control your light from an API. And we had all kinds of cool demos. We let people control the Christmas lights on Zach's house from the internet, uh, which was fun. So as we headed toward the end of that campaign, and it was becoming clear that we were not going to reach our $250,000 goal. And we were smart enough to set that high goal because that's what it would take to actually manufacture this thing at scale. Many companies that die very painfully set too low of a goal there, and they don't have enough money to really manufacture the thing that they make. That they're then just like, we made one. What will it cost to make a whole lot? So as it became clear, we knew how the game worked a bit. If Kickstarter, failed campaigns disappear from the internet, and successful campaigns stay there forever to be memorialized. You can still find the SparkSocket campaign, but you have to know the specific URL and have to be able to get there. It's not linked basically from anywhere. And so it cuts off your access to all the backers and everything. It just really shuts it down. And so in the last week of that campaign, when it was pretty clear we were not going to make it, we started giving lots of messages to have people go sign up on our website. If you want to, follow the journey of Spark, come sign up over here, and we're going to keep this going, and we'll keep you involved. Because the backers that gave us $125,000 in pledges, really, it was their product, and they loved it, and they wanted to make it happen. Right. So that really was the seed of what is today the Particle community, developer community. Now, so we knew we would lose that contact information for those folks, and so we asked them to sign up someplace else. And also, while we were in the campaign, we were thinking about accelerators, and we looked at several and thought they couldn't teach us what we needed to know. We had a reasonable business plan. We knew that there were many things that we felt like we didn't need that a lot of accelerators provide. But HACS in Shenzhen, which was brand new, where you move to China and you make connections with factories, and you learn to make things for real, the way real products are made. That was something new, and we were like, that would be valuable. If we could do that, that would actually give us we would teach us something that we definitely do not know. And so that was the only one we actually applied to, and we got in. And so we got into that while the campaign was going on, and we at the point where we even knew the campaign was going to fail. But so we knew we were going to go to China. We knew we were going to continue this journey, but it was very uncertain what this thing would become, what would come out of the socket. And this is another thing about Zach and me, sometimes to a fault. We are both very, very comfortable with uncertainty. We're like, we don't know what's going on, that's fine. And that's been a fun transition as the company has grown. You can't, that's not a message that works for a 100-person company. You can't just be like, we don't know, no problem.
Right.
Have more certainty along the way. But he and I personally are very comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty. So we hired Will, and we went to China and lived there for 4 months. And that journey of HACS, of the accelerator, in 2013, was one where, speaking of emotional ups and downs, we did not know. At the beginning, we were like, well, socket didn't work. What are we gonna do? And many pivots, like every single week was a pivot to a completely new market strategy, a completely new technology, completely new vendor relationships. But if I smooth it all out, it was at the beginning, we were a consumer product company. Somewhere in the middle, we were like a connected lamp company, and then of various kinds. There were like glowing balls that you could float on pools that we were going to sell. It was very weird. And then at the end, we came to the journey of pulling the tech out of all the products we were thinking of and just saying, we've built this infrastructure to connect something that's really unique. What if we just let other people make the product and we provide the connectivity?
Mm-hmm.
And we ran the Spark Core campaign, and that was the genesis of what today is truly Particle, and that was immensely successful.
And do you remember when and where you all were when you had that moment where you sort of realized that the pivot to the Devkit, or the pivot to enabling others to build connectivity, was the thing that you had that aha moment?
I would say it's not. I don't remember one aha moment, but it was definitely while we were at Hacks. It was definitely between January and May of 2013, and it was probably somewhere in the middle, somewhere late February-ish, where because here's how the thing at Hacks worked. There are mentors there, and every week we would have a meeting where we would go in and sit down for an hour with the mentors there. We'd say, here's the status of firmware, here's the status of the cloud, here's the latest in the developer community, here is the vendor relationships and the factories and CMs we're working with. Here's and we would just say, and here's the status of everything, and here's our vision, and here's our plan, here's how we're going to go to market, and here's the size of the opportunity. And we'd give this pitch, and then they would, with beautiful love and care and humility and kindness, start gently poking holes in our grand plan, how we're gonna take over the world, blah blah blah. And they're like, but what if this happens? And what about this? And have you thought of this? And you made this statement. Do you really know that's true? What evidence do you have that that's true?
Right.
And we would leave the meeting genuinely thoughtful and that's not going to work. They've raised some genuine issues that some of these things cannot be overcome, and we have to have to rethink things. Mm-hmm. And this essentially, and we would go home and we'd be a little bit down and back at the apartment, and then we'd wake up the next day and be like, okay, here's some ideas for overcoming that. Here's a different direction we could take. Pivot. New way to take over the world, and we'd work on it for a week, and then the same thing would happen the following week. And we probably did that 6-7 times before we even landed on the Devkit idea.
Wow. Yeah.
But a lot of the work was we had to develop relationships with folks in China, and we had to learn more about what it took to manufacture something and reducing certification costs. And there are lots of things we had to learn. And as we learned more, the opportunity in the maker space and the Devkit space really became clear. Mm-hmm. But something that is really distinguished us from the other Devkits, certainly at the time and kind of even today, are the fact that for the easy prototyping experience, we built it with components that were the components you would choose at scale. From the beginning, that was what we were doing. Because when we were building a consumer product, of course, we were thinking, we're going to make 1 million of these. We have to build this thing to be production ready. Right. So when we pulled it out, it was not, it was different than some of the other folks on the market, right? Mm-hmm. And it was already a production grade, which meant that our developer community skewed very professional compared to other developer communities. And that continues to this day, which led to, fast forward, 2014, 2015, when we start building out the fleet management dashboards and the tools for enterprise users, all those same people, makers, one of the things that we believed early on that others did not believe and gave us a unique opportunity was that the maker category, a lot of investors were very hesitant to invest in maker businesses back in 2012, 2013.
Sure.
But what we believed was that calling someone a maker, they are the same people as professional engineers at companies. It's just you're talking to them, when you talk to them in the evenings and on weekends, they are a maker, a hobbyist, that the VCs were like, That's not a segment we care about. And if you talk to the exact same person, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, they are a professional engineer at a company that is trying to make something real that's going to make a difference for a broad segment of humanity.
Right.
So that was what we believed, and turns out it was true.
Yeah, and it makes a ton of sense. And one of the things, when I talk to folks in the community and like to tell a bit of the particle story, and we're always sort of painting in broad strokes, but in general, what I like to say is that a lot of how we have evolved, and I as someone who was external, I was a particle customer for 3 years before joining the company. But I can see this, and what I know now and what I like to tell people is that sort of our evolution followed where customers were saying, like, this is where you can help us. Like, make Wi-Fi cheaper and easier, make cellular cheaper and easier, help us build, local networks at scale with mesh. And every one of these sort of new products or transformations we've made, whether it's fleet management, like you said, on the platform side, or new types of hardware and connectivity that we've enabled, is really born out of that customer desire to solve a new kind of problem in this space. And at the same time, with you sort of helming the organization as CTO from a technical standpoint, I would say that behind the scenes, a lot of your role has changed accordingly a great deal over that period. And so what I would love to hear is, as we've made these technology pivots, both on the hardware and the software side, like, how has your role changed from 2 people to 5 to 35 and now over 100, and then the different products that we've introduced?
Yeah. At first, of course, I was the main coder, because when it was just Zach and me, I'm the main coder in firmware and cloud and the website and the tooling and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we hired more people, I gradually did less of that and more coaching of the folks that I had hired, and more planning to listen to customers and say, here is the real difficulty that customers are having out there. Like you were saying, this is what we need to build. At Particle, the engineering culture is different from many other companies. At a lot of companies, engineers come in and they're sort of told that they have this opportunity to work on just the latest hot thing, whatever they want. Come here, you get to work on it. And they spin without a lot of feedback from customers, and they build stuff that is exciting to them but not generally useful. At Particle, we hire people who are really hungry. This is true of every single engineer at Particle, hungry for customer feedback. We want to build the right thing for the people who are using our platform. The engineers that make up this amazing organization are great communicators compared to other organizations that I've been at, and really hungry to provide customer value. And so my role has turned into one of, like, caring a lot about that hiring the right kind of person is incredibly important to building a healthy organization. And these days, my job is to listen a lot and to make sure we do the right things. And that means both being a steward of our culture and keeping this company functioning as a healthy organism, as well as helping our product council set the roadmap, the right roadmap, make sure we build the right things for our customers.
Right. And I love that you say that, and I can attest to that. I've been in this technology world professionally for almost 20 years now. It's hard to imagine, both as an engineer, as an advocate, as a product manager, and I will, completely agree with your statement in terms of Particle's engineers being great communicators. It is. It's not true in every organization, but I think one of the things that really sets Particle apart is engineers that, yes, care about the mission and aren't just here trying to cut a paycheck, but see the value of using connectivity to solve real problems, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, but then also are very earnest and thoughtful and intentional in the way that they communicate, not just in their code, but in every conversation, in their intent, in whether it's in person or via Slack or something like that. And so I personally appreciate that as someone that works with engineering every day, and I think that shows up in our products as well. And I think that
Yeah, I
also,
totally agree.
I think that also actually translates into the way that we approach security as a company. And I think this is probably a good spot to transition to that part of the conversation, because
Sure.
engineering really means everything here in this space. And you gave a talk at Particle's Spectra conference in October of last year. It was our first user conference, and you gave a talk about IoT security, which is
Yep.
obviously a hot topic. It continues to be something that people, there's articles about it almost every single day if you look in the right
Yeah.
places. And one of the things that you said at the beginning of your discussion is that there are a number of things that keep security-minded technologists up at night. So the first question that I will ask you, Doc, is what keeps you up at night when it comes to the
Yeah,
security
sure.
space?
Um, well, while one of my responsibilities is to keep an eye on security, Particle is pretty solid in that realm. Um, we have a security at particle.io email address that I strongly encourage anybody, any ethical hackers out there to test our stuff and responsibly disclose issues, and we will fix them and we'll pay a bug bounty. Have a process for that. Um, that stuff doesn't actually keep me up at night. What really does is either my daughter or just keeping Particle functioning as a healthy team. I care a lot about our people, and Particle's success depends on healthy collaboration internally and with our customers. And like I said before, the biggest part of my job is just making sure we do the right thing. That means treating each other well, treating our customers well, collaborating effectively. Anytime I see that a chink in that armor, that's the kind of thing that keeps me up at night. So that's thankfully I sleep well most of the
Cool.
time.
Yeah, that's great.
If that kind of stuff comes up, I can't sleep.
Right. So one of the things that you mentioned in your talk is that 2018 broke all the records in terms of data that was thrown at sites and DDoS attacks.
Yeah.
On the
2017.
2017. Sorry. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. In 2018, we actually saw less.
Cool.
DDoS went down
So
an attack, a kind of attack.
That's interesting. That was actually going to be my question. If we saw an increase from 2016 to 2017, do you think that was just? I mean, do you think there's a reason why that went down? Are we evolving our consciousness about security in general in this space?
It is certainly evolving. Security at a grand scale, security is a cat and mouse game, right? There are always the criminals and folks who are trying to break in are always creatively finding new ways, and the folks on the defensive side are always finding new ways to detect that and keep it out, and automatically heal from that kind of stuff. So. I think there is because of some of the huge attacks in 2017, there is broader awareness of the possibility of a DDoS attack and where the impact that certain kinds of targets can have on sort of fundamental parts of the internet, the backbone services that we all depend on, like DNS. When DNS goes down, it doesn't matter if all the sites are there, you can't find them.
Right.
So there is broader awareness, and that probably means there's a bigger market opportunity. I imagine there are more companies out there pitching this service, like, hey, you need DDoS protection as a core part of your offering. And so probably, if I'm guessing, this is not something I know as a fact, but I would guess that more companies have broadly leveled up the baseline of their DDoS protection. Also, that kind of massive attack takes a lot of resources, and that means for the hackers who are doing it, it takes a lot of money. And it's sort of like, is it worth it? Right? They have to make the calculus too. That kind of thing. If you pull that kind of attack, you become a huge target. draws a lot of visibility to you, and it took a lot of your resources to do it. So to do something like that, you have to have a really good reason to do one of those, just huge bandwidth DDoS attacks.
Yeah.
So it's not, I would say we've seen less of it because it's not so much worth people's resources. You'd rather do other kinds of attacks that are that quietly make you money or quietly get you secrets, right?
So speaking of that, one of the things you mentioned a few different kinds of attacks like DDoS and phishing and that talk, but you also mentioned one that I was aware of but hadn't heard this term for, cryptojacking. So what is cryptojacking?
Sure. It is essentially the secret use of computing resources to mine cryptocurrency. So some hacker out there, scanning the internet, scanning different sites, finding a way in, like finding a hole into your network, and then they get control. They get some malware on it could be a desktop computer, it could be a server, or whatever it is. And once they're in, they're like, I could do anything. What should I do? And many things that you do lead to you getting caught, right?
Right.
And so they're like, what can I do that might make me some money, but not but that I could keep doing for a long time and not get caught? And cryptojacking is one of those things that there was a growth of it in early 2018, maybe less later on. I haven't heard a ton about it lately. But that too is probably because the rise in awareness, raising awareness that is a thing you should watch. If your CPU is strangely high and you don't know why, maybe run a malware scan. See if you can detect that. So if a little computing resources from a whole bunch of controlled computers out there contributing to a mining pool can, in aggregate, make one a chunk of change. So.
Yeah. Not only that, but from a computing responsibility standpoint, I was just thinking about this. There's been a lot of talk about the power and energy requirements of crypto mining just in general, but these small little things adding up to straining our power grids even more than we are already today. Yeah.
In aggregate, when you look at sort of federal policy on this kind of thing, for any one company or user who might suspect this kind of activity, maybe it's not that big a deal, kind of depending on your view and how deeply you're impacted. But from a federal policy standpoint, the energy companies and federal government have a strong interest in preventing things like cryptojacking because they can, in aggregate, strain the power grid beyond the energy resources we actually need today. Absolutely. And in a former life, I was CTO of a company that helped with an energy efficiency program, and I learned about the energy industry there. And one of the things they have to do, building a power plant of any kind, is hugely expensive, right? And there's decades long like permitting processes and things. And so the energy companies have to plan far in advance, projecting what they think demand will be, and in different locations, because transport is hard to. Anyway, yes, to your point, it has broader impacts than one might think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy. Interestingly, I was reading an article this week. Google News has started feeding me a lot of articles about quantum computing. Because I just
one of my favorite topics, honestly.
I know it is one of yours. That's right. I remember that. And they keep sending them to me. I keep clicking, so they're just going to keep on coming. But there was an article I was reading earlier this week about actually one of the promises of quantum computing is actually that we could see a decrease in the energy consumption required to do complex calculations and things like that, which is interesting. Not a topic I can speak to a great deal, but that just kind of made me think about that.
I had not heard that, but it makes sense. I read something that recently that clarified about the promise of quantum computing and how it's realistically currently being used and will be used more in the future. And it is incorrectly characterized sometimes as just a step change in like more power, better computing, bigger. And that's not really true. Quantum computers are good. They are better than classical computers at some problems, and they're the same or worse in other problems.
Right.
So a quantum computer is more likely in the future to be something like our GPU, where it's like it's a coprocessor.
Oh, cool.
It's another processor that's in there that does certain kind of things really well, and developers will have to learn how to write the normal CPU code that then offloads certain kinds of jobs to the quantum computer. Where if you tried to do it on the CPU, it would take forever. The quantum computer's like, sure, yeah, no problem.
I like that idea of seeing that as a coprocessor. That seems like much more of a practical application than just a swap and replacement for general computing today, that's pretty cool. So on the topic, back on the topic of IoT security and cryptojacking, one of the things that you mentioned in your talk was that there had been a new California law that was the first of its kind regulating IoT device manufacturers, and that took place in September. For those folks that aren't familiar, the law basically requires that IoT device manufacturers cannot use default admin passwords on their devices, or if they do, that the user has to change those passwords when they actually enlist or claim the device for the first time.
Right. The manufacturer has to force them.
It has to force them to change it. Yeah. Now you mentioned that it's not a law that has a great deal of teeth, but it's a sort of first step in that direction. Interestingly, earlier this week, Congress introduced what they're referring to as the IoT Cybersecurity Act. It sounds like a big deal. What it ultimately boils down to is an act that requires that another branch of the government define regulations for how manufacturers that build IoT devices who work with the federal government have to adhere to those laws. So it's not a sweeping, it applies to every manufacturer kind of law. But it was interesting to me because it sort of led me down this path of thinking about regulation. Every industry and technology is increasingly becoming regulated. And there's a lot of conversations in the marketplace of ideas about regulations in general, whether it's social media or whether we're talking about software and hardware manufacturers. What are your thoughts about just the place that regulation has when it comes to improving the state of IoT security and the kinds of things you think we may see in the future?
Yeah, totally. There always has to be a balance in these things. Honestly, I'm pretty friendly. I have a friendly attitude toward regulation as long as it's done right. So what always causes problems is when there's any kind of adversarial relationship between industry and government. That causes the kinds of laws that come out of that kind of relationship just make everybody's life worse and often don't serve the purpose that they intend, because folks will just try to work around it. The industry folks will try to work around the sort of hateful, spiteful kind of thing that came out of government.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When industry and government can work together to craft laws that really do the right thing, the statement by California that like you shouldn't have admin be like the username and password on anything ever again, please. We've known this for decades. This is so baseline that anybody who's not already doing this really needs a law to require them to.
Right.
Like, and that is a smart and thoughtful law, and starting with something that doesn't have a lot of teeth and then sort of seeing where things go is a wise choice, because anytime you add new regulation to an industry, you potentially slow down innovation. There are economic factors. So it's good to just be cautious. But when companies are acting irresponsibly, and it's not, when we talk about behemoth company, really big companies, one company can have an outsized impact. But in general, these laws apply to a broad swath, and you have to look in aggregate. Like in aggregate, are most of the companies doing the right thing? Are they not? When there are significant problems where they're not, there's probably room for some regulation to nudge people to behave in a more responsible manner. Mm-hmm. So that's my philosophy on these things. Yeah. I look forward someday. It'll be a milestone if someday I work with some folks at the state or federal government level to help craft a law that does the right thing.
Yeah.
In whether it's in IoT or security or any area. I look forward to helping government be responsible and ethical and help nudge us all toward a better world. Someday.
Providing the right level of oversight to help us balance between, corporate consumer interest, right? To really to find a way to make sure that that we're building products that help, but also that we're checked. The companies are checked in the right ways to make sure that we don't take shortcuts in a few places and things like that. Because we didn't talk about this specifically, but you do mention this in your talk from Spectra. But botnets have largely become a problem in the last few years because of lack security in firmware on devices. Like these devices get enlisted because even if passwords aren't admin, there's a default that gets published somewhere on the darknet, and now everybody has it. And now you've got your next set of soldiers in the botnet army. So interestingly, in the topic of IoT security, one of the sort of controversial statements I like to make when I talk about IoT security, or when I talk
controversial,
pseudo controversial, because it's controversial, and then I explain what I mean. But I sort of will make this statement in talks that to succeed, I think that the IoT needs a little bit less internet. And what I mean by that, when I say that, is that not every single device needs to have a Wi-Fi or cellular radio in it. And that's sort of propagated some of where we got to today, which I think is a good transition point to talk about this concept of mesh networking and sort of this new class of connectivity. And how do you feel like that applies to security in terms of allowing local networks of distributed devices that aren't all just directly connected to the internet?
Let's see. There is a lot of power there. There is a lot of opportunity. I mean, to do something new. Mesh networking is new, and with any really new technology, new industry, we don't know where it's going to go. Right? This is I don't want to overstate any kind of confidence in I know this is definitely going to happen. We have put it out there now as a thing that people can start experimenting with. And we have a certain go-to-market strategy. We have some pricing listed on the website. But in large part, we're waiting for customers to tell us what the use cases will be and where we need to develop the product. Where the price should be higher, where the price should be lower, where features are missing that really are table stakes for a real deployment. What parts of it end up being especially valuable. Thinking of over-the-air updates. Just in general on our platform, the reliability and stability and uniqueness of our over-the-air updates is time and time again what every single customer and every single prospect says, this is the most valuable thing to me. This is the thing I absolutely could not live without. So with mesh networking, I don't know what it's going to be, but I look forward to hearing over time from customers what feature, what piece of it, what aspect ends up being that thing that they say, oh, I can't live without this. This is the reason I love mesh and why it has made my company successful. I do have a hypothesis that at least in the short term, the new customers who come to us will build with the Boron or the B series mass production SOMs. They'll build a cellular thing. It's just a cellular thing. They're not even using mesh, right? That's it is the bread and butter of our business these days. And then once that is in market, and they have transformed from a company that just makes widgets to a software and data company, then they will see an opportunity to say, oh, we have this thing out there, but around it, I wish we had another sensor over here to add something valuable to that system. And you can. throw a Xenon over there, write the code on the borons that can manage the connectivity appropriately for those two devices. But to add more sensors to a system easily, wirelessly after the fact, that's what I think will be the beginning use cases of it.
Mhm.
It'll start with folks not worrying about it,
Yeah.
but then it opens up this amazing opportunity for growth of our customers' ecosystems, the ecosystems of products that they create to make their devices better and their distributed systems better.
Yeah.
I think that's where it'll start. And somewhere down the road, of course, somebody's going to come to us with I need to deploy, 50,000 things, in this area, and it's all one network. And, we'll see, we'll see what the challenges are there. Taking anything to that kind of scale is difficult, and we'll see. That'll be a fun journey. But, yeah.
And I think I appreciate that answer, because I think that's consistent with what's been part of Particle's DNA from the beginning. You mentioned this earlier. But I've seen this story weave itself through creating the Spark core, and then the Photon, and then going from the Photon into the mass production modules and the P0 and the P1, as customers came and said, help me go from a dev kit to actually something I can put in my PCB. Going from Wi-Fi to cellular, going from single device management to fleet management. I think this follows that same path of saying, like, we've created a new generation of hardware, our third generation, that is tailored towards giving you a faster processor, some great co-processors for Wi-Fi, a great U-Blocks modem for cellular, LTE support, and you can use those in your single-use installations. And then when you get to that point where you're like, oh, I need that second device, or I need that third device. Now let's think about a local network. You already have the base. You already have that first device there ready to go to expand your use. And then at the same time, as you mentioned, allowing customers, and I just talked to one earlier this week where it was a similar thing of, help us understand what you're building or where you see the opportunities, and we will craft the product around this. It's not our hypothetical use cases, but your actual use cases that we want to build towards, which is important. So
yes, yeah, we want to unblock the exploration for our customers, but we don't want to overinvest until we know what people actually need.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense. So do you, and this is just a hypothetical question, but do you think that do you see any security challenges in mesh networking? I mean, I know that it solves some in the sense that, not every device is totally accessible. What do you think are some of those new security wrinkles that may come with mesh networking type solutions?
Yeah. Security challenges with mesh. There definitely will be some. We've put a lot of thought into the setup process and the security that we've layered on at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
If I step back and just want to, like, in brief, explain the security model to a customer, to our viewers, then it's like the security model right now is like Wi-Fi. You have a Wi-Fi network at home, at work, whatever. If anyone who knows the password can join that network, and then they can see all the traffic. If you don't know the password, then all those radio packets are encrypted gobbledygook.
Right.
The security model for the particle mesh networks is the same. There is a password. If you need to keep that password secret. In order to join the mesh network, you need to know that password. If you don't know it, all those radio packets are just encrypted gobbledygook. And if someone finds out that password, then they can see all the traffic on the mesh network. And so customers need to keep that in mind as they build mesh deployments. And there may be more that we have to build down the road, but it remains to be seen. Right now, that's the security model. And as far as what the other challenges will be, it depends on what people do and whether they allow. If you want to allow other devices onto that mesh network, and some of the traffic should be obscured, then you have to, in your application, add some level of authentication and encryption, right? And that's not a thing that is easy on a microcontroller. So that's something that we don't have now that we might have to build. As long as customers keep a mesh network, sort of a walled garden with that password, the current security model works, but we'll see where that goes.
Right. And frankly, I've heard from a lot of folks, and customers seem to like the current security model, which follows very much. I think about this kind of like the mesh network equivalent of using a YubiKey or another sort of external device is sort of, you have to have the password for the mesh network and access to, physical access to another device already on the network in order to join it. You need those two things. You got to, something you see plus something you have. And, that's what, even though we think that security model may evolve, I think, like you said, there's a lot of intentionality baked into, here's how you enlist other devices. You can't just do it randomly and sneak a virtual device onto the network that people may not be aware about or aware of unless they're using Wireshark and inspecting network traffic,
Mm-hmm. Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely true. I am tempted to rabbit hole, and I won't. But I'll just say, under the hood, there are so many other things happening there that you would not believe. Our team had to level up so much on on the technology for the mesh network, but we managed in the very particle-y way to take all the complex identifiers and different authentication and encryption things that are happening. There are multiple layers of this under the hood, and turn it into, there's just one password for your network. Don't worry about it.
Usually when I talk about this, I'll show people the block diagram of OpenThread, and I'll say, our hope with particle mesh is that this is the last time you have to see this diagram.
Right.
And then all you're doing instead is opening the mobile app and using mesh publish and subscribe to communicate on the network. And those are sort of the two pieces. So yeah, the team, I want to do a future episode with, one or two folks on the firmware team to actually dive into some of that, because I think it's just fascinating how much the team had to learn. Yeah, it'd be really neat. So for anybody, as we wrap up, I have two more questions for you. One is sort of the standard, how does somebody get started? You spend a lot of time thinking about the IoT security space. I know you listen to some podcasts and there's other resources you consume. So for anybody that might be interested in getting into the space or learning more about IoT security, or just security in general, what resources do you recommend?
Yeah. My main way I consume this is through podcasts, and I think that's a pretty easy, low-hanging fruit for a way for people to get in. It depends. If you open up any podcast app and you search for security or hacking or anything like this, like the list of search results is long. There are lots of them. So here, I'll make a couple recommendations. If you want something super fun and interesting and that kind of will make your eyes go wide on every episode, there is one called Darknet Diaries. I recommend. I support it on Patreon. You should too. Zachary is awesome. He reports on real hacks that have happened in the world, and really goes deep. And often I am amazed that he gets interviews with some of he finds the person who did some hack, and has them on, and their voice is obscured and we don't know much about them, but it gets to actually talk to the people who did these things, and he digs into the history, and it's an awesome podcast. So cool. you can actually learn a lot in just hearing the stories of these people. So that's a really cool one, Darknet Diaries. One that actually, if you just go search, will often be at the top of the search results, is called CyberWire. That one, little bites every single day, tons of content coming out of them. It's sort of like your daily news hit in cybersecurity. Just which APT group, like which government hacking group, nation state actor is hacking which other nation state actor or company, and what technology are they using, and what should we be defending against this week. So Darknet Diaries, CyberWire. There's actually another fun one out of McAfee called Hackable, where they often it's more specific to IoT. They basically go find something, be it a connected pet toy or a connected baby monitor or your key fob for your car or things like this, and they hack them. And it is really, they do a good job of making it really friendly, easy to consume, easy to understand. They sort of have the host who plays dumb and says like, I don't know about any of this technology stuff, but like explain it to me, and then they have the hacker who like goes deep and says like, well, it only took me about 3 minutes to totally take over your connected whatever, and then they bring it back to okay, so as a Joe Schmo on the street, what can I do about this? What should I keep in mind?
Yeah.
So those are 3 good podcasts I'd recommend.
That's great. I posted all 3 of those in chat, and I will be subscribing to all of them after we're done. That's great. So for the last question, and this is one that I asked Mohit a couple of weeks ago. I'll ask you as well. Oh, go ahead.
Actually, I want to mention one more that may not be to everybody's taste, but I want to actually give a shout out to Beers with Talos. Talos is the security group within Cisco, and this one, I love it. I don't know that everyone would love it, but you get to hear some real experts in threat intelligence go very off the cuff on just like what they're dealing with this week.
That's it. Yeah, that's great. I'll add that one as well. And in chat, we
talk
actually
about Premier League soccer.
oh, that's great. Podcast and sidebar, perfect. My favorites. So we actually had in chat, Unisarge mentioned that they've been listening to Security Now with Steve Gibson for about 10 years. So that's another one. I'm not familiar with that one, but yeah, thanks.
I listen to that one sometimes too. Yeah.
Cool. So to close, and I really do appreciate you taking the time, Doc. It's been a great conversation. I always love learning a little bit more about the history of Particle, but also just sort of explore your thoughts on the space. And so let me ask you. So here's my canned question. We talk a lot, Particle, we talk a lot about this idea of real IoT. So what is your definition of real IoT?
I was thinking about this on my bike ride in this morning. And here's how I'm taking your sun's half on my face. Here's how I'm taking, real IoT. I'm saying like, okay, well, IoT is a big, broad umbrella, big tent, like includes lots and lots and lots of stuff. But if we keep going to the exclude that stuff that's kind of not really IoT and exclude more, and we get down to the core. That's how I'm taking this this question. Mm-hmm. So the real IoT, the core thing that is like most clearly to me IoT. Well, hooray, the sun's coming out. Is a large distributed system of constrained devices like microcontrollers that deal very gracefully with spotty connectivity. So when they're offline, they do their job. And when they're online, they do their job better. Mm-hmm. And that at their heart, the core value they provide makes the world a better place. Right? Like it actually nudges this rock flying around a bunch of other rocks with a bunch of life on it to a more healthy place where we keep learning and growing and taking care of each other. So it's microcontrollers. It's a lot of them, a large distributed system, and it's dealing gracefully with connectivity issues. Because I think that's one of the things that trips people up early on when they just get into it. They're like, oh, but the connection went away. It's like, yeah, connections will go away, especially on these devices. Right. You have to take that into account. And that fundamentally it provides some real value to life on Earth or beyond.
Yeah. And I love that idea of making the world a better place. It's something that a lot of tech companies talk about, but I see that again and again that our customers actually are using connectivity to solve problems that really actually do that. So it's neat to hear that is something that is on your mind as well as sort of core to the definition. So Doc, I appreciate you taking the time today. It's been a great conversation. I'm gonna go ahead and let you go now because I know that you are busy. But appreciate it. Hope you have a great rest of the day. Oh yeah, no problem. But Thanks a lot, Doc. Appreciate it. And thanks everybody for joining. Have a great rest of your day and have a great weekend. And we'll talk to you next time.
Very much.
All right.
Thanks, Brandon.
Bye.
Bye.